The following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Players from 14 nations converge in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the third annual Spring Chess Classic. Hello, chess fans, and welcome back to St. Louis for round number 3 of the Spring Chess Classic. My name is Ben Simon, and along with me is Grandmaster Aman Hambleton, whose hair is looking fabulous today.
Well, it had to be, Ben. I just had to bring my A game to the commentary booth with you in order to compete.
My goodness. What a horrible lie that was. Well, anyway, we have an exciting day for you. You know, no one is in clear lead in either the A or the B fields. But, as you can see on USChessChamps.com, we have 3 people atop the field in each division. Let's take a look at our Group A. Liam Lee and Ilya Nisknik and Tari sitting at 1.5 points each. They are at the top. And then the rest of the field just close behind. Really, anybody could still win this. What is your assessment thus far, Aman, of what we've seen from Group A?
Well, obviously, near the bottom of the standings, early on, you can find Vasily Ivanchuk, who, along with Rustam Kasimdzhanov, those are 2 guys you definitely don't expect to find near the bottom of the table. Early on, you start to wonder, is that age showing, or is it another factor? But those guys are going to be looking to really make a bigger impact on the tournament. And, like I said, it's not nice to see the Canadian bringing up the caboose there, Ben. So hopefully he can turn the tournament around. It's early stages.
Hopefully Eric's age isn't showing as well. All right, Group B, let's have a gander at that. A similar situation, only we do have someone who hasn't scored at all. That is that FM Alexei Sorokin at the bottom, who could be an IM and was looking, and still is looking for a GM norm in this field. Jinshi Bai, Nicholas Theodorou, Gregory Caidonna all have a 1.5 today, and actually 2 of them are going to be playing, and that is our go-to matchup in Group B. Any thoughts on Group B thus far?
Well, I'm pretty impressed so far with Bhaichainché's play, and also Gregory Caidonna had a really nice game as he took out Corolla yesterday. So I'll be looking to see what he can do with the white pieces, because I thought that he played a really nice game, and otherwise Bhaichainche as the top seed has been looking very solid.
If you're just joining us, we'd like to introduce you to the tournament format. These are game in 90 games for the first 40 moves, that is, and then 30 minutes added on for the rest of the game. There is a 30-second increment from move number 1, so you're not going to see too many people run out of time, although we did see it once in this tournament. 30-move draw rule is in effect to encourage fighting chess. That means that no players can agree to a draw before the 30th move, and all the players are getting to that just about now. Here in the schedule, you'll see that each day the round begins at 1 p.m. at USChessChamps.com, and we are on the air 2.5 hours afterward at 3:30 p.m., all except for the final day to make room for playoffs if necessary. We encourage you to follow us on YouTube. We've got the chat open today, and we'll be answering your questions and looking at your comments, if they're worthwhile, that is. And also on USChessChamps.com, who knows, maybe I'll glance at the Chess24 chat as well. It's going to be a fun day. Let's take a look at the pairings. These games are already underway in Group A. Ilya Nisknik versus Rustam Kasimdzhanov. Vasily Ivanchuk versus Ray Robson. Benjamin Buck versus Jeffrey Zhang. Eric Hansen versus Liam Lee. And our key matchup today, Tari versus Akopian. 2 of the leaders, not the leaders, but 2 of the top scorers in this field will be playing. And let's take a glance at where they are so far in this game. Aman.
Actually, we're here in this game, and honestly, Ben, I've never seen such a slow-moving game. Akopian has 15 minutes, and they're on move 13 in a French, and he plays the French all the time. And Tari, based on what I'm seeing, is not playing a line that is, first of all, extremely challenging to the French, not playing a line that VAR has, let's say, not seen before. So I'm stunned a little bit by the pace of this game, because with 15 minutes left, 30 for Tari here with the white pieces, we're going to be seeing a time scramble almost for sure. So I mean, taking this from the start, because that's not very far away, we see that actually it's a relatively topical line that came out of this opening. And this b6 move by Var is in place of, let's say, b5 is another option for black here. But again, all of this stuff, there's even c4 in some lines. For example, if white long castles, there's this move c4. But b6, again, I don't know really what's taking so long other than just double, triple checking or trying to remember theory. So it's a little bit confusing me, the amount of time spent. But speaking about the position, okay, knight c5 was the last move played. Sometimes you like to play knight to e4. One thing we can demonstrate is that if white, okay, let's just make a pass. If black takes here, oftentimes white wants to take with the pawn, which might not look normal because, why would I take with the pawn when I could take with the queen and play c3 and just secure my bishop? But I actually want to take with the pawn here in order to control these two squares, play in the dark squares, and if I can, move like queen here, try to put these pawns on light squares, and a sample variation, let's say, something like this. If I can trade off these dark square bishops, I might have a real idea to put this knight on d4, and this bishop on b7 is so bad. So there are some dark square ideas of, playing on those squares here for white. So I think that that's a possibility here if you take, but of course Var probably knows better. He's probably going to go for more like this, and of course you always have that f6 break for black to sort of chip away at that center. Meanwhile, white is going to bring this knight into the action. Of course, he's not going to play king h1. He might, but I don't think so. And he's going to bring that knight into the action. You always have this f5 move looming, but when black's attacking the bishop here, you can't really get away with f5 for the moment. So,
I mean, that seems like the top priority right now. I mean, there's no doubt, right, next move that the knight's going to take the bishop on d3?
Well, again, for Var, it's that bishop's not going anywhere. So he doesn't have to do that, which is the nice part about this position for black. If white goes here, again, bishop e2 allows me to play knight e4 as sort of gaining time. And it also removes that bishop from the nice diagonal. So if I saw white maybe play this move, c3, he would be planning to play bishop c2, then I might take that bishop, exactly as you described. But if the position stays like this, I think Var can remain flexible. He can start with bishop b7, he can start with f6 maybe, queen c7, a lot of very decent moves for black. And he's got that bishop in his back pocket if he ever wants to take it. So I don't think he needs to rush with that. As a matter of fact, I think structurally, taking on d3 and allowing white to play pawn takes is actually not what black wants to do. So I think he might hold off on that, as we see Tari thinking here about what he wants to do, whether he wants to get that knight back into the game. Usually going crazy with like g4, f5 is a little bit too much in positions like this. It's kind of asking for it. So I don't think he'll go crazy like that, but rather the knight on d1 needs to re-enter the game. I think he's looking for whether he wants to play knight f2 or knight e3, it seems.
All right. Well, let's glance over to Group B, where just moments ago we had our first result.
Oh, wow.
Let's take a look at the pairings in Group B right now, if we have them. We know that in Group B, Andrei Barspulets is playing Krimson.
Mm-hmm.
We have Sergei Ahrenburg versus Christian Corolla. We have Nicholas Theodorou versus Denis Kadrich. This game actually just finished. Theodorou just put Kadrich away. Haven't gotten a chance to take a look at that game yet. And Alexei Sorokin versus Alexander Mista. And then our key matchup of the day, which I do want to look at briefly before we potentially have an interview here. Gregory Caidonna, man, he looks happy, versus Bhaichainche, who is so far the star of this event. But remember, these guys are both at the top of this field, 1.5 points each. So what's going on in Group B?
Well, we've got this game in front of us right here. Bhaichainche playing black, Gregory Caidonna playing white, and I think most notably is just somebody started vacuuming the chessboard, and all the pieces are gone. This is like the opposite of the game we just looked at. Some guys are on move 13, some guys are almost done their game. So first of all, I don't think that I need to look very hard at this to say that objectively it's probably drawn. That being said, you have to look at the space advantage, which is in black's favor. You have to look at the clock advantage, usually tells the tale about who's more comfortable with the position. also in black's favor. You know, is that enough to win? It shouldn't be. But let's say if I'm seeing anyone win this game, it's got to be black. But I don't think Caidonna or a player like him is going to have too much trouble in a position like this. Looking a little bit deeper at the position in terms of moves, well, f4 was the last move played by black here. And one thing you never want to allow, of course, is any time that you take, you never want to take back with the h-pawn, because then black would get this outside pass pawn. So as long as you can always take back with this pawn, then you have some ideas. Like, for example, if we just make a random move and I try to create a way that, you know, maybe we could think about losing, it might be something like this, where you get an outside pass pawn, maybe knight check, take the pawn, just some sort of disaster scenario. But obviously, Caidonna is not going to be falling for any shenanigans like that. But that's really all he's got to be concerned about. There's a space advantage, but I'm not sure that it's going to be decisive here. But Bhaichainche with the big time advantage, big space advantage, the better placed pieces, we look at those knights. He's the only one to me that can win this game.
Yeah, it looks like it could very well be a draw because both players do have a lot of time on the clocks.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
A lot of trades going on, I suppose.
A lot of trades. There's almost no more pieces to trade, but they're going to hit move 40. I mean, Caidonna, I don't think time pressure is going to play a factor in this. So objectively, I would say this one's definitely headed towards a draw. But we'll see if Bhaichainche can, you know, work some magic here. If anyone's going to win, I'd say it would only be him.
And the players who are going to work their magic are fighting for a lot in this event. We do have a very lucrative prize fund. Let's take a look at our prize fund for Group A. $6,000 is the grand prize going to our champion. And in Group B, not too bad itself, $4,000. We will have a combined prize fund of $36,000. So that's really cool for an event like this. You know, the Spring Chess Classic really stepping it up for the 2,500, 2,600 level players, seeing a lot of new faces and names for the first time. Okay, take us to a game while we get our first interview, Nicholas Theodorou, set up as we talk to him for the first time in the Spring Chess Classic.
All right. Well, let's jump to the A section and just see how the games are progressing there, because a lot of these games in the A group are well underway, and we see some fascinating positions here, especially the one between Vasily Ivanchuk and Ray Robson. So we have Vasily with the white pieces here against Ray. And the move Rook C8 has just been played, but first of all, we sort of have to take stock of the position here, because if anyone wants to do a head count, you'll notice that white has the two bishops, but it looks like there was a sacrifice on f4 that took place. So he's already given up the exchange, and I'll just go back a few moves to show how that happened. But Queen h4, he had to play Rook f4, and after takes, this kind of wacky position appeared on the board, and looks like, again, another slow-moving game. Only at move 19 here for Ivanchuk and Ray Robson. We saw Tari and Akopian on move 13, which is, again, kind of insane. So it seems like everyone is sort of going slower than usual today. But someone who wasn't going slower than usual today and actually has this game finished is Nicholas Theodorou, who's joining us in the studio. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, yeah, Nicholas, you won your game. I was just saying how some games were actually on move like 13. They're still playing. And here we go. We actually have a decisive result in the B section. So if you wouldn't mind, take us through the game, especially just right back to the start, about maybe some key moments and where you think maybe went wrong for your opponent.
Yeah, so my opponent played this line in quite a few games.
Mm-hmm.
So I had prepared before on move 10.
So you were prepared up till move 10?
Yeah,
Okay.
which
Here. And this is not too abnormal, this queen exchange, even though black can't castle, it's still pretty standard. So as we get up to move 10, you were talking about this move here, this b4 move?
yeah, it looks strange, but I'm pretty sure it's a novelty.
Okay.
So I just looked at this 1 hour before the game, maybe.
So he played knight d7. I guess
Yeah.
I can ask the obvious question is, what if he takes?
I think it's actually the best move, and I have to play knight d2, after which he has to play bishop e6. And now after b5 I have, I think, more than enough compensation for the
Right.
pawn.
So just playing for the initiative here, and this king starts to feel a little uncomfortable maybe with the open c file now. So
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So did he spend quite some time on b4?
I think he spent about 5 minutes to play knight d7, but he spent a lot of time after b5,
Right.
like half an hour or so.
Right. Yeah. b4, b5. I guess the whole idea of this supposed novelty that you mentioned is just to rip open the queen side and
Exactly.
yeah, just create some issues for this king on c7. So you said he spent some time here. b5. He came up with this move h6, which I mean it has some obvious intentions. But what did you think of h6?
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable move. I mean, he obviously prevents me from playing knight g5, and he might also consider playing f5 in some positions.
Maybe try to block the bishop. I don't know. Rook d1 you played, and was there a point where you felt like you really got a serious advantage in this game?
I think so, but I'm not exactly sure about the evaluation. Of the
Okay, good.
position.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Rook d1, knight b6. Takes knight d2. And I guess when did you sort of exit, let's say, preparation, or you still had some ideas, I imagine? Most of the
I
game.
exited preparation after h6, basically. So.
Right. g8.
And here a nice trick was if I play bishop a3, he has rook takes d2.
Right. And we also cover d6 as well as forking these, so that's nice. Should be 2 then. So after c5, knight c4, I mean takes knight e4, then you get to the
Yeah,
d6 square. It starts to look pretty good.
I don't think I have any other options, so
Right.
it's pretty straightforward.
Right. He's forcing you to
Yeah.
play some good moves maybe. Takes.
And now he told me after the game that he completely missed the bishop c3, bishop a5 idea
Right.
when he played takes and rook d8.
Because I guess this is actually really annoying to ever challenge the d
Yeah, of
file.
course.
So did he?
So his intention was to play takes, and after rook d8, knight d6, he wanted to play either knight f5 or knight c8. But after bishop c3, he doesn't have any moves.
Right. Okay, so he was intending, let's say, a move like this, taking advantage of the pin, but then after this, he's just in
Yeah.
trouble, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So probably his only option was to take on e2 instead of rook d8.
Right here,
Yeah.
and you would play.
After which I wasn't exactly sure what's going on, but I thought rook e1, bishop a6, and now knight d6.
Right.
He might be able to play f6, and now f4 looks reasonable.
Yep.
Rook b8, and maybe even bishop a1.
And just try to take here next.
Yeah, because if I play bishop c3, knight d5 might become annoying.
Yeah, you can get a check, but nothing more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually missing bishop c3 to a5 caused his position.
Yeah,
to
that was the
just-
critical.
Yeah, that was critical. Rook takes d1, but then after rook d8, knight d6, probably, I guess, did he notice at this point? Because now
Yeah,
he had to change his ideas, and he came up with bishop e2, but now I guess it's much different than the previous line.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
now black is in big trouble.
Rook e1, bishop a6, you play bishop c3, pretty natural. Yeah, but rook b8, and essentially we're almost just down full tempo from the last line we looked at together. Yeah. So you took knight d5, and did it seem just pretty straightforward from here, or were there any?
Yeah, it looked quite straightforward, but I also considered bishop a5, king d7, and
right here, you mean?
Yeah.
Bishop check, king d7.
And bishop h3, king e7, for example. I take on e5. It also looks really good for white, but I thought bishop takes e5 was simpler.
Right, by you. Right, so bishop takes e5, takes rook b5, but with knight c6 and this, I think the position becomes just.
I think that he did have one chance in the end. I'm not sure if it's correct, but bishop c8,
right,
knight b3, rook b5, and now he might, after rook c1, he might be able to play king d8, and after knight d4, knight c3. It might be completely crazy, but
that's an interesting move. Knight d4, knight c3.
So after rook c3, rook b1, bishop f1, he has bishop a6. And the difference is that if his king was on b8, I get to play rook b3 check.
Right. So actually the same line, played king b8, just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. That's an interesting. Did he, obviously he didn't see it, but did you discuss it with him?
Yeah, I told him after the game, but we couldn't find, we just discussed it briefly, but we couldn't find anything for white, immediate.
Sure. So still better, but maybe you had.
Yeah, maybe he could defend for some more moves.
Right, some more work to do. Knight c3 is fascinating. Unfortunately, then I guess for him, he played king b8, and then the whole line doesn't work. So knight d4, and now knight c3, as you mentioned, there's going to be a rook b3 in the end of the line. Yeah. So knight d4, and he just resigned here. Yeah. He's going to lose some material. Rook a5, knight c6, and obviously the knight is hanging. So. That was a really, actually really quick game, I guess, for us. It was the first game done. So obviously it's nice for you to get that win, but you're also doing quite well in the group so far, so you're off to a good start in the tournament.
Yeah, that's true, but it's still really early, so I cannot get too excited.
Right. That's a good attitude. Obviously, congrats on the win today.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking us through the game, and that's Nicholas Theodorou in Group B. Looking to stay on top of the tournament. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Wow. And that was a quick game to start us off here for today's action in Group B. Also in Group B, there are some pretty exciting games and ones that look like could easily finish with some nice attacks. For example, the one between Sergei Ahrenburg playing white here against Corolla. Both sides are launching a pretty devastating attack on one another. White with ideas like rook g3 and the g7 pawn, and black with a 30-minute time advantage and this tender pawn on d3, which is just sort of holding the whole queen side together. You have to wonder, positions like this, who is going to crash through first? But there's actually quite a lot of attacking games going on, and wouldn't be surprised to see some more finishes, decisive results in Group A and Group B today.
A game that really caught my eye during that interview was Vasily Ivanchuk versus Ray Robson. I know that Ivanchuk is maybe underperforming a little bit. I'm not really sure if that's proper to say, but he looks to be in command right here, and there's a knight pinned in the center of the board right now in the current position.
Right. And there we see Vasily Ivanchuk on your screen. There's been a few moves since we had checked this game last. So the rook was on c8, and essentially just complete paralysis here for Ray's position, is you've got the bishop lined up to the queen, and it's really hard for black to get developed here. This isn't necessarily that black's just up the exchange. This is like Vasily Ivanchuk probably with a really good sacrifice, because what does black have to do? Knight c6, rook takes a8, and knight takes d4. Pinned in the center of the board, knight takes e2 is the way out of that. So that brings a few moves to mind, like even something as crazy as like King H1 becomes a thought just to completely pin that knight and say that you don't have any way out. If we did something like King H1, then Queen B6 comes to mind as a way to keep defending that knight, but get out of the pin. I'm not sure if King H1 is completely necessary. I mean, we can play this bishop anywhere. Bishop takes G4 as well. You got to think about all these discovered checks. So knight F3, knight E2, and then the queen comes down and takes the bishop on B2. But
I think I'd take the pawn.
You'd grab it, huh?
Yeah, I'm going for it.
You'd grab it. Bishop takes G4, and here queen takes F4 is not quite a checkmate threat, because actually after bishop takes here, we cover all the checking squares, so it's nothing to worry about. After bishop takes, let's say something like knight E2 or knight F3, the reason why it's not that scary is, let's say even pawn takes, queen takes here. I imagine with a move like bishop E6 taking here, pawn takes on E4, that white should have the upper hand. But for example, bishop E6 here and bishop D7 is also something to consider. Hitting this knight and saying that it's pinned to the rook. So something like this may also yield a big advantage for Ivanchuk, as we see both players are on move 21 in the game so far, and 13 minutes, 11 minutes apiece. There's probably going to be a time scramble here, but Ivanchuk seems to be tactically in control, is what it looks like.
Yeah, neat looking advantage for Ivanchuk. Let's jump over to Group B. Sorokin versus Mista. Strange situation here. We have on the live board the c-pawn, Sorokin's c-pawn, down on the 7th rank. And the last move was rook d8.
Wow.
I'm counting the pieces here. Does this pay off for white?
Well, let's see how that pawn even got there.
Yeah.
So it looks like this came from a Grunfeld. I recognize this position, and Sorokin here with the white pieces went for this sort of enterprising idea after queen c4. He said, okay, let's go. D takes c6, so he gets a knight, he loses a queen, he also gets a rook. But the sort of ace in the hole is that pawn on c6 going all the way. Bishop f8, c7, bishop e7, double the rooks, king f7, and rook d8 on the board. Wow. Wow. Okay, so let's have a look here. Rook d8. First of all, if white's position is pretty solid, there are maybe some back rank issues, but the queen is not in a position to make that threat yet. Queen e4, anything that guards the rook, we can just queen, and after that, the material is in white's favor. So if I have to give up my rook for this pawn, that's pretty much it. If I take, though, which seems to be the big consideration, that's where we get the real imbalance here, is I don't think rook d7 is not anything. I could take with the rook or the pawn. The rook looks trickier because then I'm still threatening to maybe get a queen.
You gotta do queen e4, right?
Queen e4, and again, this pawn is down here, but the question is, I guess I have to play maybe make an escape square. I think I probably have to make an escape square or play the move knight d2. But what black wants to do next is he wants to play queen b7, rook c8, and then finally take that pawn. And it seems like he's actually able to do that. So let's say, in the worst case, in all these complications, what we're likely to see, whether we see rook takes d8 or pawn takes, is we're likely to see like a rook and two pieces against the queen, let's say. And if that were to happen, because black actually takes on a2, and we have this a pawn running, it's quite possible, especially since that knight, you see all those business squares covered by the black pawns. It's hard to make any threats against the king. This could actually be in black's favor if we're not careful here, is why that a pawn runs pretty quickly, and the bishop and knight just aren't very helpful.
Yeah, what a heartbreaker for Sorokin if that's the case, because it just looks so hopeful with that pawn behind enemy lines. I just want to do something with it,
Well, I think he can do better than what I just said, because I think in the very least, it feels like he can maybe leave that pawn on c7 and maybe have a rook go down to d8, which was the other line we looked at. And then at least black has to work a little bit harder to get a queen against the pieces. But the move that was just played on the board is queen a4. Trying to deal with the situation tactically is Alexander Mista. And we actually have another move coming straight off the bat. That's rook 1 to d7. So after rook d7, one thing that does is it removes the possibility of bishop takes d8 now, just as a threat. So if there's no bishop d8, I feel like we almost have to, I mean, now I'm getting a little concerned because rook takes is a threat, and if rook takes, right, then just takes and you can't even take me back now. This is concerning to me. So I'm not sure, I mean, I don't know, I can't say for sure, but to me that move looks really strong by white, pinning the bishop. Now all those lines I was talking about where maybe we want to take the rook, try to get that queen against the three pieces, I don't even see those existing anymore because the bishop's pinned. And if we play like king here, I'll just play rook takes, and I've got queen next move, and if queen takes and I make a queen, there is no back rank because that is pinned to the king. So even these lines don't seem to be working out here.
Yeah, it's suddenly looks very, very solid for white.
Yeah, this move, again, I don't know if there were other lines in the last position, but queen a4 and rook d7 looks like a good sequence for white, because now the threat is just rook takes, and let's say queen c6. What happens after queen c6? That looks like a move. Queen c6, though, there's technically no threats in the position. He's not threatening anything with the move queen c6 because this is not a threat, and there's no other moves really. So white can actually do whatever he wants. For example, he may even be threatening something as crazy as like knight e5, forking the king and queen, and if pawn takes, maybe bishop g5. All of a sudden, I mean, I just see a ton of lines which just work for white based on queen a4 and rook d7. So I wouldn't be surprised here, Ben, if Sorokin might actually get his first point of the tournament, and it'd be a win at that against Grandmaster Mista.
Indeed. Guys, if you want to keep up to the action, keep up to date with the action, remember uschesschamps.com is your stop for all of the stuff having to do with Spring Chess Classic, the standings, the games live, the ones we're not talking about. You can see them at any time. Sergei Ahrenburg versus Christian Corolla in Group B. When we last had it, I think more moves have been played, right? Queen g6 on the board for Ahrenburg.
Yeah, this was actually the same position, and Corolla is still thinking from the last time I brought it up. Right from the start, well, this started as a Sicilian, but it was one of those positions, actually quite similar, Ben, to the VAR game that I was mentioning, the idea of knight takes on d3, and how white sometimes wants to take with a pawn. This is another example of where that exchange has actually happened. And what it's done is it's created a fun position, maybe not for them, but for the spectators at the very least, because no one likes to be sort of living on the edge like this. Well, some people do, but it's risky. It's risky. You never know whose attacks can crash through first, and what we see here is Corolla with a 20-minute time advantage or more, and Sergei Ahrenburg sitting there at just 1 minute, move 27, so they have 13 moves to play until that time control hits, and he really feels more comfortable with the extra time. But it's white trying to crash through here on the king side, and black with maybe some sacrificial ideas, also pressuring that d3 pawn, trying to crash through on the queen side. And let me tell you, this looks like a very tense position.
No, it looks like black's going to crash through a lot faster, wouldn't you think?
Well, he's thinking right now, and he's got a pawn that's just completely hanging. So he could take this, but then first of all, there's this pawn hanging. There's also rook g3 to think about, and I think rook g3 is really what he's focusing on here, because rook g3, if I just keep taking, bishop g7, and I have to really be concerned about getting mated myself. So the problem I think that the Corolla is facing here is that he needs to put some element of defense into his next couple of moves, which you never like to do. You wish you could just attack. But it looks like rook g3 with this threat is quite serious, serious enough that I think he has to deal with it defensively.
Bishop f6 doesn't hold up anything for black?
So bishop f6, the issue right now is that the knight on c5 would just be hanging. So you would actually have to throw in knight d3, and then rook g3, and then knight d6. But if we did that, bishop f6, now, again, I could take it, and if you take, you're getting mated, and you can't take that way. So that's probably the type of things that he's thinking about here. This is frustrating. You want those defensive moves to work, but at the same time, he wants to maintain his attack. So I think what he's facing here is this rook g3 move and bishop takes g7. Bishop f8 does cover things. So for example, like this, bishop f8 seems to hold things together a little bit, but I mean, rook here, I mean, these are some scary lines to be calculating with queen h6, bishop takes, queen takes e6, and it's just, this really puts the human calculation to the test when you're going move by move, who crashes through first, because it all has to come with tempo, and make sure that you're not getting mated before you deliver mate yourself.
Ahrenburg really down on time here. You can see 20-1 on the clock.
Yeah, no, he is suffering, especially in a position like this, Ben, which is so tactical and requires really so much calculation. You can bet that in this position, while it's Corolla's turn to think, that he is just racking his brains trying to think as well, because as soon as it's his turn, he's almost got to move instantly for the next 13 moves.
13 moves, indeed. I want to look at Barspulets versus Krimson, also in Group B. They're in an endgame with rooks and a miner on each side.
All right, and
it looks... So we got pawns on the outside, but they're blocking each other, right? So,
well, I have to say initially that this looks a little better for Barspulets here. He's got the bishop against the knight. Most importantly, he's got this pawn on f3, which gives him an escape square, but it also really kills this this knight where it can go aggressively. Black, on the other hand, has to always be concerned about back rank issues. Let's not forget that there is a pawn hanging on f5 here. And on top of everything, you know, if I can establish this bishop on this diagonal, then I could easily defend my pawn, maybe while also contributing to the attack. So I think definitely slightly better for white in this position. Whose turn is this? White to move. So rook takes b4 was the last move. But the rooks I really like in the center here, and I think that the back rank threats, combined with the fact that this pawn and this pawn look a little bit loose to me, and this knight is dominated by the pawn, I think white has a noticeable advantage here. I think white has a noticeable advantage. He's just played a move, actually, since we've been on the board. He went rook to b5, so the idea being takes, and we're hitting this pawn, so okay, maybe a3 will be played, but this is what I'm talking about, where the bishop can establish itself on this diagonal and hopefully get comfortable there, while the rook maybe goes to a6, takes the pawn, d3, take the pawn. This looks like white is maybe picking up a pawn here and looking good in the endgame.
You're giving Barspulets the advantage here. Do you think that black's going to take him up on a rook trade?
Well, that's an important question, first of all, because the only thing about rook b5 is that it nearly forces it. Rook c4 is not possible. Neither, I mean, rook h4 and rook f4 seem a little bit insane. Obviously, there's g3 in both of those lines. Rook check can be played, but again, leaving the last rank just exposes you further to checkmate ideas. So I'm not sure that he's going to be too interested in doing this. And otherwise, yeah, you're pretty much forced to take me. So I think that he's kind of forced to play rook takes b5, bishop takes b5, and after this, you know, with your a pawn hanging, maybe you don't play a3, but if you don't, you've got to play probably rook a8. Rook a8. Rook check would be another move to consider. King f2, rook check, right, to take this. But I think this is where we start to realize those back rank issues, right? Here, and it's just game over by either checkmate or I'm going to win all your material. So that's why there's no way to solve the issue tactically. And I do think Barspulets has the advantage here in this game, even though it's almost symmetrical, knight against bishop. But I think the bishop really can dominate the knight, and especially with the back rank issues, I think Krimson still has a lot to prove if he wants to draw in this game.
Very well, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I didn't notice that all that entire rank was cut off.
Yeah, the whole
There's no
rank.
reason to avoid a trade there.
Can't go here, 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 and then of course these last two squares, f4 and h4. There's always g3 to hit the rook. So kind of annoying, but I think his hand is forced into this exchange one way or another, and that should favor white here as he gets rid of a rook and weakens the a-pawn for the future.
One game that we should glance at in Group A is our star from yesterday, Grandmaster Nisknik, taking on the 2004 FIDE World Champion, Kasimdzhanov.
Right, and what do we have in this game? Nisknik seems to be a fan of double pawns. Ben, that's all I can say about this one so far. Nisknik he's got two sets of double isolated pawns here on the F and B files.
So just everything is weak.
That's what it looks like. I mean, if we go back a little bit, he actually weakened Kasimdzhanov's pawns, and funny enough, Kasimdzhanov, instead of playing pawn takes on d5 in this position, he was like, okay, I don't want the double isolated f pawns, so I'm going to throw this up the board, make sure you have them, and then I'm going to take. So people are trying to avoid the double isolated pawns, which makes a lot of sense here. Queen d3 was the last move, and here we are on the board. Kasimdzhanov ticking down under 4 minutes here. They've got 13 moves to make. Nisknik with plenty of time. But it's actually these pawns which are quite solid, in my opinion, for white. This b pawn does prevent the a pawn from moving. So basically these pawns are just fixed for the moment. Rook a1 in the future, for example, just targets the a pawn. It can't move. It's sort of a sitting duck. Also, this pawn on d5, as we can see, is completely under attack here. And if we play the move d4, which looks entirely logical, I have to wonder about this move because, first of all, we are not really threatening to take because the rook is hanging here. Knight f5 is a very natural move to hit the queen and the pawn. He has played d4, and of course he should, because there's no way to defend the pawn in this position from knight takes d5. So he's going to push it, and he's going to say, okay, you know, let's say something like this happens. Of course, he's going to respond bishop g7, and it's actually white who's maybe in trouble here with the rook. But there might be a way out of this. For example, like, I don't know, queen e3 or queen e2. One line which is just not working is this. Of course, we don't even have to take that. Rook d4 is just suicide because of queen here and checkmate. So there are a few ways to tactically defend, but I don't think it's going to be in white's interest to ever play knight f5 and take that pawn. It's just doesn't make a lot of sense to put your knight right in the line of fire. So I think Nisknik here is going to look to try to play the knight against the bishop position, but I don't think that the Kasimdzhanov is in too much trouble in this position. As long as he establishes sort of bishop on g7, queen on f6, I think he can hold this position, actually, as the pawns are technically equal here.
And I want to jump back to Group B because we have a happening, or we think we're about to have a happening, Sorokin versus Mista. I hear that Mista is shaking his head and it does not like what he sees. Remember that pawn behind enemy lines?
No, oof. I didn't like what I saw either. So I understand the head shake. What did he play? Rook e7, he played queen e4, h4. Yeah, and this is what I was saying. As soon as you take away the back rank mate, there's no threats for black. I mean, you're just a sitting duck. King e6, rook b8, which is a very cute move because you're just sort of clearing the way. It's like an usher. You got these two muscular rooks on either side, just keeping everyone away from the very petite Ariana Grande there, who's about to promote. And what are you going to do? Rook b8, if you take, okay, take back, new queen. If you take my rook, now I've got c8 protected by the rook. So the rook on a8 is essentially a non-participant in this game, and it's a nice move. Probably one that Mista overlooked, but I can't say that it's one that, if he didn't have that move, that black was fine or anything like that. So it's a nice move, but I think Mista was probably lost in any case. Yeah,
Grande is looking pretty good right here, and we saw that Mista just moved with seconds left on the clock, and now he is shaking hands. And Sorokin, Alexei Sorokin, the FM in Group B, is on the board. Finally.
He's on the board. Bishop d6 was played, and now after rook takes d6, it's just game over, and he resigned here because, of course, king takes, and there's just another queen appearing on the board. So actually, that queen sacrifice completely worked in the end. Now, I don't know about, on its way, whether it was completely sound, but that's just like the human instinct. He saw that pawn gets up to c7, it'd be tough to handle, and he took his chance, and, well, obviously it paid off in the end, but Mista felt the pressure of that pawn always being one square away from queening, and it was enough to get Sorokin on the board, as you said, so a nice first win and confidence boost for him.
Yeah, I think that was a fun little combination we saw there at the end. I think there's one game we haven't taken a look at yet, Benjamin Bach versus Jeffrey Zhang in Group A.
Right.
Let's take a glance. Now we know that Benjamin Bach of the Netherlands, he won his game, I believe, yesterday. And Jeffrey Zhang, a U.S. junior championship competitor, a champion, the world champion in junior chess. Let's see what's going on here. Only a minute left for Bach.
Yeah, less than a minute there, and he's really feeling it from Jeffrey Zhang, but he's just played, as we see here, this is what's the issue, is coming from this position, Zhang has this rook on c3, which is so annoying. If I just put this rook, or rather put this pawn on b6 and say that your rook has to go back, that it can't establish itself so deep in my position, maybe like seriously better for white, much better position. But that rook on c3 is so annoying that we almost overlook that black is sitting there with an isolated pawn. Because that rook on c3 hits the pawn on b3. I never want to take it because you take back and suddenly that c-pawn is very dangerous. But he unleashed a combination a few moves ago, bishop d6, queen f3, and bishop takes on h2.
Why can the king just not take the bishop on h2?
So king h1 played by Bach in view of this idea, which we take this rook on c1 as a result of queen c7 check. So not a very difficult tactic, but when you're down to a minute and you're feeling that pressure, I mean, this is the explanation for why we see the blunder coming in there. But now I think it's no surprise that Zhang is completely winning as a result of this tactic. So king h1 had to be played. I mean, anytime the guy can just sort of like open your door and grab the cookie jar and leave.
Punch in, punch out.
That's pretty bad news. So bishop back to e5. He's threatening to take here. Then the b3 pawn hangs. Knight to b5 was played. The question for me is whether the move rook takes b3 can be played. Because if rook takes b3 can be played, then black is just completely winning here. It looks like it can, for the most part. Rook takes d5, then just a queen move. We're actually threatening queen h6 here as well, getting down there, and we've got this passed b-pawn. So rook takes b3 looks like a big move here. Also, maybe just rook takes, and just play a pawn up here. But he's going to calculate here. He's got time to do so, and it's Bach with a minute. He's blundered the pawn, and basically he's flailing at this point. I expect him to lose this game.
Another game that's about to end in Group B is Caidonna and Bhaichainche. Caidonna is on the verge of resigning, and I also understand we do have Alexei Sorokin about to come in for an interview. So let's glance at this while we get him set up.
Right, and wow, this is just Bhaichainche, atop Group B, who's really making an impression so far in the tournament as it looks like he's grinding out a win from what seemed to be a rather harmless endgame. Now, there's definitely a space advantage for black. Definitely the pieces were quite impressive for black. I mean, almost everything was better than the counterpart for white. The king was better placed, the knight was better, but it didn't feel like that was enough to actually grind out a win here. But he's proving me wrong. Look at this. E5 was the last move played by white, and it's now black to play. And I have to feel like as long as we move the king, just don't play the move g3, because what white's going to do is he's going to play knight e2, and he's going to capture that pawn. So for example here, knight there, and he can actually take this. And I imagine with the pawn pushing up the board and the king coming in, he'll actually be able to save this. But instead, he's actually played the move king e3, which seems logical. And the real issue here is something like g3 is going to happen, and then maybe h3, h2, h1. So Bhaichainche looks like he's maybe on the verge of just completely winning here against Caidonna. So a bit of an endgame collapse, or maybe that position was actually a lot more difficult than I thought, because he's actually going to pull out a win in this game. But while he does that, we're actually going to jump into an interview with Alexei Sorokin from Russia. Thank you very much for joining the broadcast. And we just took a look at a very exciting game that you just played against Alexander Mista. You came away with a victory, and in doing so, you also sacrificed your queen in a pretty fun way. So we'd love it if you'd maybe take us through some key variations, especially want to know about that queen sack, because that looked like a lot of fun. So what did you think about the opening from your opponent?
I didn't know the move b6, and I spent a lot of time, about 40 minutes, for calculating some variations.
Right.
Yeah. And then I find this sacrificing.
So this is all pretty standard, right?
Yeah.
And were you pretty much in your preparation for the most part here?
No, my opponent didn't play this variant.
Okay.
So
Yeah, so everyone is free for all. Bishop g5, f6.
yeah.
And we've seen this line before, definitely, and then this
And,
b6 move.
yeah,
maybe,
ED, it's main line.
This one here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So ED, C4, bishop take, bishop E6.
Right.
Yeah. Rook D1. Knight E7, and take the bishop, take the queen, rook, queen C3, bishop B3, and queen C1, queen C3.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and something like this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I mean, there's even main lines where the queen gets sacrificed. So it's
Yeah.
not a new idea, but it certainly seemed like you did it in a unique way when it happened in the game. B6 was played, and yeah, you said you spent quite some time after this move, right?
About 40 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Just checking everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And after bishop a6, I mean, did you always have the intention to sort of follow up with maybe a dc6 move at some point?
Yes.
Or did you expect him to play the way that he did?
Yes, but I just gonna check everything.
Yeah. Takes rook fd1.
Yeah, and in this position, my opponent also spent a lot of time. I think that he had interesting move for knight a5, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, and I think black is fine.
Doing fine.
Yeah, maybe I should play c4, knight c4, queen a2, b5, and
Maybe take or.
maybe take or a4, and some interesting position, but I think black is fine in all variations.
Right.
Yeah, so my opponent can choose a different variant.
Sure. Did you think maybe that was better? Like, how did you evaluate maybe this
I
position
don't
here?
know. I think that bishop f8 and a7 is very strong move. I didn't calculate it.
Sorry, bishop f8
No,
here? Or
take.
later,
and-
yeah. This?
Yeah. Bishop a7, rook d1. Yeah. And after rook d8, I don't understand why my opponent just he can just take everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so this
and,
was the line that I was expecting.
I don't know. I think it's about equal position, but maybe even black have some chances. Because
Were you planning to take with the pawn or the rook?
Pawn, because if I take the rook, then queen a4.
A queen a4 or queen e4, you said?
E4.
Queen e4, yeah. Right, and okay. Basically, it should be the same type of thing, but worse version for you. Maybe you have to spend some time, and queen c6 is coming, so that's true. But yeah, I also simply thought that this position, I mean, I don't know how you evaluated it, but maybe seems like also could be scary for white.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, I think that it's about equal because I always have some check and
yeah, you can put the rook and maybe some counterplay on always something.
But of course, black position is fine. They
should be
have
fine.
no problem.
Yeah. So maybe just some I mean, oversight or overestimation.
Yeah, and queen a4 is big mistake.
Yeah, it should just be a big blunder, and this move is quite strong.
I don't know, maybe I don't know what my opponent means.
Right, yeah. I was wondering maybe what was calculated.
Maybe queen c6, and then I play knight a5.
Like this.
e5.
Yeah. No, this is.
And bishop g5.
Yeah.
And I win.
Yeah. So maybe he was intending this, and maybe overlooked knight e5. Is possible.
Or maybe if, like in game, he missed rook b8.
Right. It's another strong move because then it's just impossible to stop. Because it's possible maybe he was considering, well, if he ever takes, then I always have the c8 square covered, but rook b8 is a nice touch to finish off, and basically it's just winning at this point. So rook b8, bishop d6, and of course he was just down to seconds, so no difficulty finishing off with rook takes, and obviously your queen next move. So I wasn't sure about let's say pawn takes on c6, whether it was good all the way or bad all the way, but it seemed like a really interesting game, and maybe just he should have played bishop takes d8, and we would have seen 3 pieces against the queen. It would have been also an interesting endgame. Yeah, but okay, you came away with the win. It's also your first point in tournament, so I mean, congrats. It's really good to get on the board with a nice game here. I wanted to ask you about, your rating, your FM, sitting with a big rating. You're obviously you have the qualifications for IM.
I have 2 Grandmaster nons, so I wanna just skip IM.
Yeah. Those unnecessary steps when you're already playing at the level. So obviously this is a good tournament chance to do that, and it's nice to get a win here. So one step closer. But thanks for taking us through the game, and good luck in the rest of your games.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we're going to jump back into the games, guys, but that was Alexei Sorokin who took us through his nice win there. And let's see who is still in progress here. And we have that really exciting game from earlier that we were taking a look at between Sergei Ahrenburg and Christian Korolla. And actually, Korolla has gotten all the way down to 2 minutes. And Ahrenburg has been playing on 1 minute this whole time. So both players are now basically surviving on the increment. And this was one of my favorite games to look at earlier because both sides were just launching absolutely everything in the position, going for the attack. Knight takes e4 was played by Korolla. This is jumping back a few moves ago when we were looking at it. Rook g1, and of course it looked like it would just be a pile-up on the g-file here. And after takes, queen back to b5. This is the current position. There's been one more move. knight to c1. So, I mean, Ben, these are the positions that the attacking player lives for. It doesn't even matter if you're white or black here.
Right.
You know that the position is going to be completely messy. I have to say that it strikes me that as long as there's nothing happening here, which there isn't at the moment, black should be winning. He's got the 2 bishops. He's got control of this diagonal. And the white king is almost like 1 check away from basically checkmate, as he's boxed in here completely. So rook here, and that's a threat for white, but that's a few moves away here, and rook to d8 has been played. And this is what I mean, where rook d8, you hit that bishop, and the problem is there's just no time for this. So black starts to get his pieces in with tempo, and exposing that all these pieces, they're 1 move away from a big threat on g7, but right now they're not threatening anything.
Right. I mean, and you can't even really defend the bishop without...
Right. No, you can't.
Without pulling stuff off the g file.
Exactly. So he played bishop e5, and I mean, in this position, we already have to think about ideas like how this rook gets into the position. Both players down. Now, actually, Korolla is lower on time than Ahrenburg, which is actually crazy. I mean, if you remember, he actually had 30 minutes to 1 minute earlier. So he tanked all his time, not in a bad way. I mean, he spent it wisely, and I think that he still got this position under control, but who knows what the time is going to do. Is 7 more moves need to be played, and I believe that Korolla just moved there.
He did. I'm not sure what he did, though.
He played bishop to b7. Bishop b7, hitting the pawn on e4, and essentially getting ready for probably some sacrificial stuff here.
Got a result in Group A. Benjamin Bach and Jeffrey Zhang. Zhang has won with the black pieces. The pawn storm, we got 2 passed pawns on the A and B files. Too much for Benjamin Bach. So maybe we will be able to talk to Jeffrey here in just a moment. Congratulations to Jeffrey Zhang, a former classic champion here at the St. Louis Chess Club, and also World Junior Champion 2016.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that game was the one where it just all looked bad for Benjamin. That tactic on h2, blundering the pawn, and then, of course, from there you just march the pawns up the board. So that's a nice game for Jeffrey. I see we also have Ilya Nisknik and Rustam Kasimdzhanov. They had a draw in their game. That was a position that I was saying looked quite equal early on. So that's no surprise to me there, as they were getting low on time, and it was the bishop against knight position. So that one's also a draw, and that means Ilya continues to sort of do well in the A group.
Right. In the B group, Caidonna still has not resigned. And this is something before the interview with Sorokin, I thought we were going to see Grigory Caidonna imminently just resign, but he's still playing on.
Yeah, no, I think you always play these positions on because it's not something that you ever study in a book. It's just you've got a pawn and a knight. Hey, I mean, people get forked all the time. So these are tricky pieces still. He's going to play it on, absolutely. Bhaichainche, he's no doubt completely winning, but he's going to have to find out exactly how to do that. And I've even experienced myself some of these tricky endgames where the pawn gets so far down the board, and if it was just a queen against that pawn, of course, there's the normal technique about how to triangulate, how to win. Yeah. But then when you add a knight to that situation, it just like ruins your whole coordination, and you start to maybe get confused. So he's definitely going to play this on. But with correct play, and of course they've hit move 40, lots of time for Bhaichainche to find this. He should be completely winning here.
All right, we understand that the superstar from Dallas metro area, Jeffrey Zhang, will be in for an interview shortly, so
Fantastic.
I'll leave you and see you in just a moment.
Absolutely, yeah. No, we got lots of games here to keep us occupied. One of the ones I want to take a look at is one that we haven't jumped to yet, which is Eric Hansen's game. So what is he doing in his position against Le Quang Liem? It seems to me like while the position might be rather equal, I want to jump back a few moves here. Both players have hit time control, but it seems to me like Eric's position would be slightly preferred. He's got the repetition on the board if he wants it here, but he's also hit move 40, so he can sort of decide here how he wants to play. he can take this draw. It looks like the last couple moves have been a repetition, but alternatively, he can choose to play on here, and he's got the time to think about it and decide what exactly he wants to do. But Hansen's position seems to have improved. We haven't jumped to this game really today so far, but it looks like it's okay. Maybe it would be equal, but I think Eric's on the slightly better side of things with the current pawn structure. But in the meantime, we're going to be jumping to an interview with Grandmaster Jeffrey Zhang, who is joining us here in the broadcast. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you.
And we just saw you take care of your game against Benjamin Bach, and it actually seemed, I mean, he missed a tactic near the end, but I was hoping you could take us through the game from the start, maybe some of the key moments.
Yeah, definitely. I believe that he played more or less quite well for a long time, because, okay, I thought I had a very reasonable position out of the opening, but it turned out there was some slight pressure, and he kind of kept pressing. So yeah, let's go ahead. So yeah, Queen's Gambit accepted.
Right.
And this B3 line is, he played C5, B3. It's becoming quite fashionable, so it's a very solid try.
Yeah.
And this was all I had checked before.
Did you expect B3 from Benjamin specifically, or it's just
no,
one of those
not
lines
really.
that...
But yeah, everyone's been playing it, so
right.
I mean...
Yeah, something to be up to date with. So A4, B4, Knight BD2.
Yeah, all of this I had, so after Rook C1 castles, Knight C4 takes, I mainly looked at Knight takes.
In this position, right?
Yeah, Bishop takes also is a move.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, all I could remember was Knight D5 should be correct, but that was about it.
Makes sense.
And perhaps Knight C5 was overambitious, because maybe I can just swap the knights. I mean, Knight takes E5. I assume he'd take with Knight.
Yeah.
And something like Rook C8 possibly should be very close to equal, if not equal already.
Right. Right.
But I decided to try Knight C5, maybe more interesting.
Was that in a hope to be ambitious, or just to keep the pieces on the board?
Yeah, just kind of to keep the pieces on.
Right.
And
yeah, Knight C5.
he played Bishop F3. So yeah, already he pinned the knight, so it started to get a bit uncomfortable. Okay, Rook C8 seemed logical.
Mm-hmm.
And now Knight D3 was very strong, because originally I had planned Knight C3.
Right now, yep.
And the idea is if Bishop C3, Bishop F3, Queen F3, Knight B3, and it looks like all of White's pieces are hanging, all
right.
of them actually.
Yeah,
and,
actually all of them.
The tactic should work for me.
Right.
But unfortunately he has a very nice trap, I think, so instead of Bishop takes C3, he can take the other knight with Knight takes C5.
Uh-huh.
And okay, if I grab the queen, he goes Knight B7, and it's an overwhelming position, I think.
Yeah.
3 pieces.
Way too many.
So that was a huge issue.
Right.
So instead of Knight C3, I had to settle for A5.
Yep, and this is the game. A5,
And
Bishop
he
takes.
took, yeah, takes Knight F4, probably a decent approach.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a confusing position, because I think it was very hard for me to untangle, and strategically the A5 pawn will always be a weakness, so it seemed, maybe it's not terrible for black, but it seems very quite unpleasant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're going to be getting this isolated pawn type of position, but you're almost saved by the idea that you can sort of plant your rook there later on, which you did do.
Yeah, it's kind of my hope. I played Bishop E7, but I missed his next move. Queen D4 was very strong, and his idea is first Queen A7 to just simple double attack, and it's hard for me to defend. Or Knight H5 going on the other side is also very dangerous.
Right.
So I thought, okay, I have to simplify, so I takes. Bishop takes F3, I think, is just a very unpleasant position.
Right.
Queen F3.
Yeah.
I saw the engine offered this, but I mean, it's very...
it's hard to play. I mean, the knight is just so strong here. And,
because, okay, I at least tried Bishop D5 to at least try to kick the knight.
yeah, because then if you take the knight against the bishop, I mean, at least the knight's not hitting your pawn, let's say.
Right, exactly. But the problem now, maybe he could have moved the other rook to D1. And the point is, let's say I play like in the game rook c5.
Mm-hmm.
Now he can play e4, and bishop g5 no longer skewers the rook.
Right.
So now that he
That's a
moved the rook
detail.
off. So actually my plan was, instead of rook c5, I wanted to do something interesting. So I wanted to go bishop g5 right away.
Here you mean?
Right
or
here,
in the
yeah.
game? Yeah.
And, okay, he should probably play queen g4 or g3, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then my plan was actually, or I thought about this, is probably not enough, but I wanted to try bishop f6, let's say, e4, and I wanted to try to sack the queen. So like
Right.
bishop takes, c4, takes on d8, probably rook f takes, b c4, b3. I mean, I'm sure it's not enough, but
Right.
maybe it was a try. I don't know.
It's interesting, and just so strong, that pawn getting to b2, and saying that maybe a few of these pieces are offside or
Yeah,
not
hopefully.
participating.
Yeah,
But,
it's probably over optimistic, but
right.
but if not for this, I wasn't sure how to defend against.
If you did
rook
go for that
CD1.
line.
Yeah,
Right. I guess you'd have a tough choice had he done this in the game, because
definitely.
this is
yeah.
definitely.
I mean, I
risky
probably
line.
wouldn't have gone for this, but
Right.
so. But he went with the other rook.
Right. Rook f to d1 here.
Rook c5. And now I wasn't expecting takes. I thought he would play h3 maybe, because I wasn't sure exactly what my threat is.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think I was going bishop g5, because now this is interesting. So the point being, if queen g4, queen c7 looks strong. And I think
Right.
it's working out. Queen g5, bishop f3, and otherwise pin on c file is a bit annoying.
Yep.
So he should probably stay on this diagonal to stop queen c7.
Right. And it's another reason, I guess, why the rook on c1 is
Exactly,
misplaced.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
lines like this.
Let's say maybe queen g3.
Uh-huh.
So I would keep chasing him, bishop h4. Okay, obviously if he goes back, a draw is good, but he can try queen h2 here. But now I think queen c8 could be interesting.
Yeah, same idea.
Knight b6. But with queen on h2, there should be something, like maybe rook c1. This queen sack looks more promising. Knight c8, rook f c8, and yeah, this looks much,
Yes,
much
this
more
looks
serious.
maybe more than
yeah.
promising. Yep.
So, yeah, maybe in this case you would have to kind of take a draw, because
Queen f4, queen g3.
yeah, it's difficult how to avoid
Right.
this.
Maybe back and forth. Uh-huh.
So-
But these are all details from the rook being
Yeah.
on c1, which is quite critical.
I think, yeah, rook c1 may have been just much better. So he took takes, knight e5,
Mm-hmm.
rook c3, I should try.
Yeah, I think this was...
And I think he played correct. He should bring knight to d4, because if he grabs this pawn on a5, it's a bit too much, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Rook a8 should trap the knight immediately.
Right.
So, yeah, knight d4. And now I set a little bit of a trap, but okay, I wasn't expecting him to fall for it. I played bishop d6.
Was it also maybe a product of time pressure? As
It was
he-
definitely, yeah.
He was really getting low on time around this point.
Right, yeah, but anyway, I still expect him to play queen h4. I mean,
Right.
it's-
Yeah.
And I was going to try f5. Maybe, again, he was low on time, so maybe this f5,
Mhm.
f4 could be something
Annoying
to
to face.
worry. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's always an annoying position where you don't want to take, but you're also tied down to defending the
Right,
rook
yeah.
there. So, okay, the queen's offside as well, and it's not as comfortable as those positions where the knight's on c4 for
Yeah,
white.
yeah, it improved for me. Yeah. So yeah, instead queen f3 was maybe not a losing move. I mean, not getting worse, because there was a line bishop h2, king h2. It was hard for him to calculate with only 2 minutes though. So queen g3, rook c1, rook c1, queen c1, knight f5.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if queen like c3 for example, there's knight h6, f7. So this is a draw.
Right.
So
That's
I
a
have to
good
try.
detail.
I've tried
G6.
G6, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost sure there should be some draw, but
Yeah,
it's not.
feels like it's close, but not quite.
It's actually not so obvious. For example, let's make some move. Knight h6. Because after knight h6, okay, first if I can also play king h8. Actually, I realized, because queen d6, king g7. But yeah, this queen e7, I guess, also should be draw, right? I have to defend queen c8 and knight f7.
Yeah, then at the very least, yep.
So he should, I should try after knight h6, king g7, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But, okay, now just knight f5 back. So, yeah, I guess this was the way to just draw.
Right. Yeah, but bishop h2 sometimes, when the time is low, it comes
Yeah,
as such
yeah,
a
he
shock
wasn't
that
sure.
he missed the idea, probably, and...
No, I have a feeling he was calculating this, but he wasn't sure.
Right.
And, yeah, I guess...
It feels like something you almost go for, I guess, if you're... Otherwise, you just take the pawn and come back, but... yeah, I guess when the time is so
He
low.
maybe thought that he could still hold,
Okay.
even without the h-pawn.
Right, right. So
But
like a
also he
position
should
like
have
this.
he should have gone to f1 probably, because king on f1 looks better.
Mm-hmm.
Just closer to the center and no h-file nonsense.
Yeah, because there was a few sort of like queen coming to h6 ideas
Yeah.
in the game.
King h1, bishop e5. Now, wait, so probably, again, knight e2 I think was more precise. So knight on b5 doesn't block the fifth ring, so he can take on a5.
Right, something like this, if you take on b3, you mean?
Yeah, like rook b3, queen d5 suddenly, it's a completely different story with a5.
Right,
pawn.
without the knight there. Yep.
So, yeah, knight e2, I would have had to take on c1. It's still a pawn up, but good drawing chances, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, he'll play like this, but okay, it's much better than
Yeah.
the game for sure. It's not dealing with this move. Yeah, so knight b5, and
I think queen e6 was a strong move.
mm-hmm.
Just forcing him to open the f-file if he wants the ending. And it's hard to avoid it, because, okay, he tried king g1, but after rook b2, it's very hard to avoid, because, yeah, it's hard to find another move for him.
Mm-hmm.
I might want to suddenly play queen f6, for example, and...
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't trade the queens, maybe you actually keep them on the board.
Yeah.
And that king on h1 from earlier means the f2 score is a little tender, so...
Right, but now the problem was with this tempo, so like queen e6, f e6. Ideally, he would play rook c5. I think actually rook c5 was probably the best try still, just rook c5.
Right.
Because he somehow needs to... I mean, in the game he just had no counterplay at all, but somehow he has to figure out a way.
Right, it actually seemed really... really smooth at some point.
I think so,
The
yeah.
way that it got converted. I mean, f4...
Because, okay, actually the point was if rook c5... I think I have to go bishop b8, which is a much worse square, to keep the f-file open for the rook.
Right, because I mean, if you can choose where you want to go
Yeah,
f6, then
but
then
it's a much worse
better.
square. yeah.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah, so but again, it's he's faced with this tough job of like having to find all these accurate kind of moves
Yeah,
with
for
such
sure.
low time, and I guess maybe this was the last straw, sort of, because once you get rook
Yeah.
a2 and rook a4, I mean, these speak for themselves, and the bishop kind of covers all the threats around the king. So it seemed like this was just a nice finish as well. Rook
Yeah.
a1, but again, it's hard for him to cover everything. So yeah, actually, you managed to come away with a nice game. It looked like a pretty complicated middle game, but some tactics worked in your favor, and maybe the critical move was maybe rook f to d1, not rook c to
Exactly,
d1.
yeah. Obviously, it was very fortunate because,
Mhm.
I mean, I was on the ropes for almost the entire game. So, yeah, I guess, I think time was the main factor for
Right.
the turnaround.
Right. Well, I mean, it's part of the game. So, yeah, congrats on the win, and obviously good luck in the rest of your games. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right. That was Grandmaster Jeffrey Zhang with a win against Benjamin Bach in very convincing fashion there, with some tactics and some unfortunate time pressure for the Grandmaster from the Netherlands. And the games here continue to, I mean, in Group A, there's actually still a few games ongoing. We've had 2 draws, and Jeffrey, the first person to win in Group A, but Tari and Varuzhan Akopian still going in their game in a very close rook end game, as well as Eric Hansen declined, I believe, unless he's still thinking about it, declined a 3-time repetition against Le Quang, unless he's still able to take it, and maybe he's just pondering that. So what do we have in Hansen's game? I think it was 1, 2. Yeah, it was 1, 2, and he actually declined threefold repetition to play the move Queen F3, but I think he's more or less got this draw on hand with Queen A8 if he wants it, but he's sort of spending all his time knowing that he's got that draw on hand, and trying to see, like, can he play for more, Ben?
One of the games that I was looking for, or looking at in Group B, it was Ahrenburg and Corolla, the one
Right.
with the big attack on
insane
the G
attack,
file.
right?
I gotta be honest, I just saw that meter swing in White's favor big time, but I haven't seen why yet.
Whoa.
Black has just played bishop to c5, taking a protector off the g-pawn. Is that fatal for Corolla?
So my position looks absolutely different than yours.
Well, let me reload here. Maybe
But
mine
bishop
is off.
c5 was played, but that was before time control. So the bishop c5 move, as we see probably a resignation there from Grigory Caidonna, as Bhaichainche does in fact take care of things properly with the queen against the knight and the pawn there, and again establishes himself as the front runner in Group B. He beats Caidonna, who Caidonna himself came off a nice game yesterday. So Bhaichainche just sort of takes out a guy who's maybe looking for a second win in a row.
Yes, and indeed, the position I proposed earlier was outdated. Well, congratulations, yes, to Bhaichainche, but the front runner, he was expected to win, and he's playing up to those expectations so far.
He is, absolutely. Now, to talk about the position that you were mentioning, although the position maybe has developed a little bit, the players have hit time control. So Ahrenburg can finally breathe a little bit. I mean, the guy has been playing on increment for practically 20 moves here with a single minute on the clock. Finally, it's time control, so he has a bit more time to think. He's got this queen b2 checkmate idea to always be aware of. But what was the last move played? It was rook e8 check, rook f8, and rook e7 is played, threatening mate and the bishop. I'm wondering if rook f7 is going to be the response or not. There's rook e7. Are there tricks here? I don't think so. That's a mate. You could move the rook. I guess rook d2 does uncover the queen here, but okay, there's all sorts of tactics in the position to look out for. So I'm not actually sure what's going on here. Rook f8 was just played by Corolla, and this game has probably, I mean, I'm sure the evaluation has shifted up and down, black's winning, white's winning,
Yeah, it has.
for the last 10 moves.
The chat's been pretty active talking about it as well.
Yeah. I don't envy the guys who actually have to go and calculate these variations, because I can just blunder a rook or something, but it's on the analysis board. But these guys have their game at stake here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who comes out in this one, because it's just a topsy-turvy kind of affair. Barspulets versus Krimson. Anything different in here?
Right. This one is still underway here. Andrei Barspulets, I think this is the type of position that I envisioned, where you sort of, black can play passively, get that rook over there, and he has to defend the a-pawn, otherwise it's just a goner to the white rook. You've still got that pawn controlling where this black knight can go, but at the end of the day, Krimson's not down material, so you really can't come to too many conclusions about how white is totally winning when black's not even down material. Now white's better for sure, and he's going to be pressing here as black's rook is tied down. But I don't actually see a way that white can break through. I mean, if you move the knight, there's bishop f7. Okay, we can move the knight back. I don't see. I think he's past the worst of it. It seemed like earlier he had to worry about maybe getting his king out and stuff like that. But now I think he's sort of survived that, and I imagine that this is probably going to be a draw. But make no mistake, white is slightly better here, and I expect Barspulets to push for a win.
we still have a few games going on, and before we end the show, I'd like to glance one more time at Eric Hansen versus Liam Lee.
Yeah.
It is intriguing that Eric turned down the draw repetition, and I want to see if this pays off for him.
Right. Now, again, the position was sort of developing like this, and this was the threefold. It was knight e8, queen a8, knight back, queen back, knight back, queen back. And here, queen e4 would have been the third time. So he played queen f3, and Le Quang Liam responded with the same move, knight e8. So again, it just seems like he's got this queen a8 move if he wants to, and again, that would be the third time for that position. So he sort of got this draw on hand, even though he changed his move. So he seems to have it whenever he wants. Now, why is he playing on? Because he's the one who has the outside pass pawn potential here. So I think he's trying to decide, as the clock really ticks down here, Ben, is do you go for the draw or not? Now, here's that terrible thing in chess is when you spend half your clock deciding whether to take the draw, you're almost making up the decision for yourself, because now you almost have to take it. Otherwise, playing on, maybe you miscalculate something, you misevaluate something, all of a sudden you're got half the time of your opponent, and maybe you even are in trouble in some lines where you maybe miss something. So this is always that scary moment for a chess player when you've got that draw in hand and you're like, well, it's right in front of me, but let me just think, see if I have anything else. You spend so much time thinking, you just basically got to take the draw at that point. So we'll see if he decides to play on, but that would be a gutsy decision considering that Le Quang Liam now has more than double the time on the clock.
Right. But what a win it would be.
What a win it would be, exactly. And no doubt that thought is flashing through his head as well. What a win it would be, taking out Le Quang Liam. He obviously played a good game to get here, where he's even got that choice against Le Quang. Hey, do I do this? Do I do that? But a big decision, I think, coming up. The next couple moves will tell us whether Eric's going to play on. The other thing I'll say is that it's just that almost the pride of a chess player, where you know you're slightly better and you're playing a stronger player. It's like, are you going to bend and just take a draw because he's a strong player, or are you going to be honest with yourself and say, well, if this was a low-rated player, I mean, there's no question, right? I'd play on. Yeah. I know I'm better. So I think Eric has just played the move a5, and there you go. He's trying to say, look, being honest with myself, white's better. If he believes it, it's kind of disingenuous not to push the position. So here we go, Ben. He played a5. He's going for it against the top seed in the tournament, and he used quite a chunk of his clock for that move. So we'll see if it pays off for him.
Do you like where Eric is right now on the board?
Do I like where he is on the board? Yeah, seems to be situated properly. It's well in his chair there. Yeah, I think I like where he's at there, Ben. Okay. But a5 looks like a very reasonable move. Now, it looks a little maybe crazy in some sense, like, wait a minute, I'm giving up sort of this b5 square for the black knight, and he's been shuffling there back and forth. But the reason I like this move is that white can now target that pawn from a safe square like e2, all the way down there, maybe even d3, offering exchange of queens, b7, whatever. You can target that pawn, and if black responds with knight c7, you also have the queen b6 square for your queen now. Whereas, let's say we played queen e2 here, you'd always have to think about the move a5, which is very annoying, undermines your knight there. So by playing a5, he's sort of catching that before it can happen. And yeah, Eric's played a5. I think that's a good move. Definitely one of the correct ones if you want to play for the win. So thankfully, you don't spend like 15 minutes on your clock and then just have a horrendous blunder. So that's not happening. I think he's on the right track, but really it comes down to the time pressure, because Le Quang Liam, he knows he's in a slightly worse position. He's probably going to be picking up the pace, looking to put Eric under time pressure.
All right, very well. Well, we're going to wrap up the show today here from St. Louis. I got a good question here in the chat asking, they say, we have such great content on our YouTube channel. We really do appreciate that. However, we miss Yasser. Will Yasser be back to do more lectures? Yasser's here all the time. He's not scheduled to be at Jam and Rez coming up, but I'd say never, especially with Yasser. He's around here all the time. I'm sure you'll see more lectures with him.
Right.
Thank you for joining us, though. Before we part, let's take a look at our standings in Group A. This is with some results pending, though. And we know that Jeffrey Zhang and Ilya Nisknik are at the top after their results today. And now, Jeffrey Zhang, We've seen this before. We call it the Jeffrey Zhang train. Once it gets rolling, it's really, really hard to stop. And so we might now be on that locomotive, and we will see if Jeffrey can become a 2-time classic champion. I know we're a ways away. I know. But with Jeffrey, it's never early to start talking.
Right.
But then Liam Lee, this is going to be a fun showdown in the later rounds. Let's take a look at our standings in Group B. This is with, what do we have? Okay, we have 2 games still pending. Bhaichainche, Theodorou, Caidonna at the top, but disappointing day for Gregory.
Right. Yeah, no, he went down in an endgame that looked equal, but I'm quite sure, Ben, that there was a lot more to that than met the eye there. The space advantage, the time advantage, and just the pressure being put on by Bhaichainche there. So Nicholas Theodorou, though, seems to be having a great tournament so far, and he's up there with 2 wins. So he's doing really well there. An international master, obviously looking to finalize everything for himself with the Grandmaster title.
And I understand that we're going to glance forward a little bit and look at the pairings for tomorrow. Group A, first of all. Group A. Kasimdzhanov, Liam Lee. That should be a fun game.
Wow,
Akopian Hansen? All right. I'm digging this round. This is going to be a lot of fun tomorrow. Nisknik, Ivanchuk. What sticks out to you? What are you looking forward to tomorrow?
Well, another really fun matchup for me is Jeffrey Zhang against Tari. That's a battle of 2 youngsters, and on top of that, Jeffrey Zhang is on top of the table right now, and Tari is actually still playing his game. He's in a rook endgame, and Tari, if he draws, is still going to be tied for first, and his game looks like maybe he has a chance to win, but also a pretty good chance to draw. So that could be a match between 2 of the tournament leaders at the time, as well as just 2 really talented young grandmasters.
Yeah, that'll probably be our leaderboard key matchup. And our pairings tomorrow for Group B, round 4 action. Korolla, Theodorou, Bhaichainche, Sergei, Ahrenburg, Barspulets, Caidonna. All right. I don't know off the top of my head what will be the leaderboard key matchup. Nothing is jumping out right now.
Well, we still have Korolla's game from this round, which needs to finish, and that one has been. I mean, Corolla's been playing some, whether he's been on the good or bad side of it, he's been playing some pretty exciting games, and Nicholas Theodorou is top the leaderboard, so maybe that'll be an exciting game as he's trying to secure his top spot, and Corolla really has nothing to lose. He's been playing quite exciting games so far.
Well, we'll be back tomorrow with you at the same time, the same place, uschesschamps.com. Remember, the action continues tonight at uschesschamps.com. But tomorrow, 1 p.m., the games for round 4 get underway, and we will be with you 2.5 hours later at 3:30 p.m. This show was produced by the world's greatest production B team. Tammy Hyde is your streamer, Danny Machuca, the technical director, Isaac Schrantz is graphics and audio, and for Grandmaster Aman Hambleton, my name is Ben Simon. We will see you tomorrow, right back here. We say so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.